Since I'm so close to having a little one, I tend to forget things, and this will just be easier for me here. Are you good, Camille? Okay. Thank you all for joining us today here at Fit Family Chiropractic. I'm very excited to share some home birth information with you. I had a beautiful home birth with my first, Rhea, and I will be having a second home birth in the next month and a half. When I found out I was pregnant for the first time, I believe my words to Riley were, "It's okay, I'll just have him give me a bunch of painkillers and knock me out." I look back and laugh about it now, but sadly it was something that had been conditioned into my brain. Hospital births were all I knew of, really. My mother had hospital births, her sisters, and the same for most of my father's side of the family. However, my mother's birth stories were very different than the ones I hear today. Hers were less invasive and medication-free. Yeah, catch my breath. the slower, heavy breathing. All right. Shortly after my comment, Riley made the suggestion of taking a natural approach to childbirth. It made me stop and think. I guess I never really thought about it before. I mean, I'm a farm kid. I grew up with birth, life, and death all around me. One would think I would have had been more aware of the concept, but I wasn't. It made me stop and think about what I wanted my first birth experience to be like. So we started researching home birth step by step by connecting with other parents that had home births, gathering a list of local midwives. An important one to me was hearing other women's birth stories. Since this was my first pregnancy, I felt like I needed to go back and hear my friends and family stories again. Because sometimes you just aren't fully listening to the details until you can directly relate yourself to that situation. Their stories never really stuck with me. Most were told with fearful moments and complications, and that's all I would remember. As I read stories, watched videos, and asked my peers to retell theirs, home birth stories were the most eye-opening to me. Women were left feeling with a sense of empowerment, clarity, and understanding. The hospital stories were fear-based and daunting to hear about. It raised even more questions. Breath again. Sorry. Such as why, with healthy, normal pregnancies, were there such wide spectrums of experience during births? Why, when I heard hospital stories, did they all start sounding the same? Same for the birth stories. What did I want my story to sound like? What did I want it to feel like, and what did I want it to look like? It didn't take long for me to know that home birth was what resonated with me. One thing I did not enjoy with all of my research was the approach some speakers would take in giving the information about the opposite birth path. It tended to be fear-based towards the other. For example, if I was learning about hospital births, they would find ways to tell me about how birthing at home wasn't safe. And the same went for hearing some speakers on home birth, giving statistics of emergency situations, complications, last-minute C-sections, and large amounts of medications at wide varieties. Although these things tend to run true, it didn't make me feel very comforted. Statistics are great. I actually really, really like them. I think they're an excellent informational resource to make your decision, but I knew that I was going, resource to make your decision, but I couldn't base my birthing style off of fearing the other options. I knew that I was going to have a home birth, but fearing the hospital wasn't necessary either. Childbirth shouldn't be scary. Childbirth is not a sickness. It's not even an accident, or even meant to be a surgery. Why have we come to see it like that now? It's something that humans and animals have been doing for an eternity. I wanted nothing to do with fear-based information, but it's all I was finding. I'm happy I'm able to see that, and I choose to take it with a grain of salt, using the facts for my decision-making and focus my emotional mindset on the positive experiences of what home birthing has to offer. Instead, I chose, and again now am choosing, to build a team around me that I know I can rely on during the delivery, to keep the babies in my best interest at the top of their list. But more importantly, allowing me to allow my body to direct the delivery. On my time, my choices, my wants, and my needs, while keeping us both safe. It was also important at that time that I told myself one day if I had an opportunity, I would take advantage to offer home birth information from an empowering standpoint instead of a fear-based one. To fear the hospital, to fear the other path, to fear the pain isn't necessary. That brings us to today. I was going to wait until Riley was in practice for over a year, but with us expecting, the timing couldn't be better. It's giving me the chance to really focus on my next birth and reflect back on my first one. Thank you for coming today. My goal is not to only have you leave with more knowledge on home birth, but also know that natural birth can be empowering. So today, we are joined with some of the people who are a big part of my home birth journey and many other women. I would like to introduce Vanessa Stephen Cowater from Family Tree Midwifery. She is an independent Minneapolis home birth midwife, serving families in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, St. Cloud, and surrounding communities. She offers an experience in the midwifery model for your birth at home. Vanessa.
So I'm going to sit on this ball because I'm always trying to model good behavior for my clients. And if you use one of these during your pregnancy, you're going to have your baby in a better position for birth and make birth easier and maybe a little faster, and maybe your back won't hurt so much. So when you're pregnant, you don't want to sit in a ladylike manner. So you sit like this, leaning forward on this ball. Are any of you pregnant now? Where do you all come from? Are you? When do you expect your baby?
Around April 30th.
Oh, okay. Coming right up.
Yeah.
Is this your first?
Yes.
Okay. How are you feeling about it?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So far. Yeah.
Excited,
Yeah.
nervous, a little bit of
Oh,
everything?
yeah, for sure.
Anybody else?
Obviously.
Not yet?
No.
You've got the baby pressing on your lungs. Your lungs are getting tiny.
I know.
There's so much baby in there.
It sounds like I ran a mile before.
Yep. Just talking, it feels like a workout. So I have 4 kids. My oldest is almost 21. I planned a home birth with him, all that time ago, and I ended up with a transfer to the hospital and a C-section. So one of the things I always say to people first is you explore all your options, you make the best decisions you can, and then you got to go with the flow when the time comes. So there aren't any guarantees. People don't hire a midwife for a home birth. They hire a midwife for a safe birth, a healthy birth, and to take care of mom and baby and make sure that things go as well as they possibly can. So I got to do that, and then I had 3 more, and I had home births after that, and it's just great. So I have 4. The lowest one is 8. So I've had pretty much every kind of experience you can have. I had a C-section, and then a hospital birth, and then 2 home births. And I didn't get to do it like they do in the videos. I didn't breathe my baby out. There was a lot of crying and complaining, and then my midwife would say, "Do you want to get in the tub?" And I'd be like, "Okay," So I wasn't super brave, but I still got it done. I wasn't very fit. I wasn't, I was just an average mom having babies, and I could do it at home. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure to talk about it like it's a marathon. You have to be in super good shape. You have to be the most prepared person on the planet. You're just having a baby. You don't have to do all that. You do your best to be educated and prepared, and then let it go. So I became a midwife. I started about 14 years ago. I spent 6 years learning from another midwife in town who's still working. She's been working for like 36 years. So I got to learn from an elder in my community, which was really cool. That was how I always wanted to do it. And so I didn't go through nursing training or anything. Most of that isn't really relevant to home birth midwifery. But I did get a really, really good, thorough midwifery education from the midwife that I worked with. So that was really nice. She's somebody who's still a friend and a mentor, and I can call her when I want to talk things over. It's just really nice to work in community. And any good midwife is going to be part of a community of other people, and all of those people are supporting you during your birth. It's not just the one midwife that you have. It's the people that we call upon for backup if we have 2 clients in labor at the same time. It's the people who you can call someone else if you have a question and you want somebody with more experience to give you some advice. So we all work together as a community. So yeah, I started, with a traditional apprenticeship, and then started my own practice when I was good and ready. So I'd been to a couple hundred births before I ever went to my first on my own, which was really nice because I felt very prepared. And things are going to happen at birth that you need to deal with. You don't want it to be the first time when you're out there on your own. So I felt good about that. Now, Anita's pregnant, so she doesn't remember things. I'm 45, so I don't remember things either. So sometimes I'm going to refer to notes. if that's okay, so I make sure I talk about everything I wanted to talk about. So things are a little different some things are the same in a home birth as another setting, some things are a little bit different. The prenatal care is the same schedule, but the feeling of it, I think, is completely different. You have 45 minutes to an hour with your midwife, and if you need more time, you can schedule more time. And you don't have to feel pressured, you get a lot of chance to talk. You don't have to see a different person each time to meet all the people in the practice. You get that one person who, is almost certainly going to be the person who's there at your birth. So you get what we call continuity of care. And that is something that people really talk a lot about, but hardly anyone ever gets to experience. And so when you're in this setting, you can either have one midwife or a group practice that has two. You're gonna know who's gonna be at the birth and feel pretty comfortable. So I think that makes it a lot different. Your midwife is really accessible. So when you have a question, you can call, you can text, you can email me. If it's urgent, you call until I pick up the phone. You don't have to go through an answering service or a nurse or something like that. So there aren't any barriers to having a real trust relationship with the caregiver, which I think is really nice. So, your midwife is just there for you 24/7. I don't go on vacation. I don't say, hey, I can't come to your birth because I'm out of town. I'm just here. If I wasn't going to be around, I would say, hey, I'm going to be gone in June. Here's a list of other midwives that you could call so that you can make sure that the person who you hire is the one who's going to be there for your birth. So it's a little bit different. You don't have to wonder who's going to be there. And then if you do end up in a very rare circumstance, I've had happen a couple times that you have a conflict and there's 2 moms in labor, there's a full moon, there's a snowstorm, and all the babies want to come out at once because that happens. We have a network of midwives that we call upon each other for backup. My first call is always the lady who trained me because she's as close to me as you're going to get. Her style is kind of similar. And so we always try to match up, people with families if we have to do that. And so you're never not covered. You don't have to go to the hospital if your midwife is very ill or at another birth. You just get a different midwife to come to you. We really focus on a lot of things during the pregnancy, a little bit differently than what you would in a hospital or birth center. We don't do a lot of testing. I don't do a lot of testing. Most of those tests, if you're living a healthy lifestyle, you're not going to need them. Group B strep is a bacteria that they test for that can colonize the vagina and rectum. I don't test for it at home because I'm telling people how to avoid having a problem with it in the first place. So if you are working from a public health perspective and you're in a hospital and people are eating junk food and don't have healthy gut flora and you don't have any influence over what they eat, sure, maybe it makes sense to test people for that. But in a home birth setting where I get to know people and I know what you're eating, I know what kind of lifestyle you're living, you don't have as much risk and you look for other things instead. So I talk a lot about nutrition, talk a lot about getting exercise, other kinds of health care. Chiropractic care is really important. There's all kinds of things. We focus on preventing problems in a home birth and not just focusing on, oh, your blood pressure's high, now we need to get the baby out. What do you do, all the things during pregnancy that you do to keep it from getting that way in the first place? So we start real early. They usually visits start around 12 weeks because I want to have a lot of time to be able to teach you what you need to know so that by the time you get to the end, everything's in place to have a good experience. Sometimes transfers to the hospital happen, but not too often in my practice. It's about 5% of the time. And, those are usually first-time moms who have a really long labor and baby doesn't want to come out and get exhausted. Sure, we need help. Part of my job is to help you to know you need to be in a different setting for the birth. Most of the time that's during labor, not during the pregnancy. But, that's part of our job is to also work with other care providers and make sure that you're getting what you need if you need something from someone else. So one of the nice things about having a home birth is once you get to the part where you're actually in labor, you can call, you'll have questions, is this really labor? Your midwife can help you figure that out over the phone. Sometimes I do a visit, come over and see how you and baby are doing, help you to know is this a real deal, help you to know when to have people in your space, not too soon because you can make the labor go away, not too late, you want to have the support there when you need it. And then you're not going anywhere during your labor, so you can really get in a rhythm at home. You get comfortable in your own space. You don't have your cerebral cortex firing off, telling you should be stressed out about this. You're in a car. This is a dangerous place to be. Oh my God, I'm in labor. You're at home. You stay as relaxed as you can, and all the people around you are helping you do that because staying relaxed in labor actually helps the labor go better. So it helps prevent complications, it helps prevent high blood pressure, it keeps you calm, keeps the baby from being stressed. If we can keep all of your hormones functioning to make your labor work, when you get stressed, it shuts off the labor hormones. So one of the safety measures that we use at home is to help keep you from getting stressed. So we're keeping the lights low, talking very quietly. All my clients have access to a birth pool if you want to have one. They're nice, they're heated, you can get in and out. So you can have a water birth if you want one, but it also, getting in the water helps to calm stress hormones. And so if you get to the point, if you've heard about transition, where your body is wanting to push the baby out, but your cervix is still dilating and you're getting a lot of conflicting signals and you're starting to freak out, that's something that happens a lot in labor. That's a great time to get in the tub. And then I can remind you, hey, you can do something different now. So we don't have access to pain drugs at home, but we do have other things that we can use to make sure you stay as comfortable as possible. So that part's important. Part of my job as a midwife, I feel, is to prevent suffering. So if you're hurting, I want to make sure that I can do some things to help you feel better and to help you stay calm. That's good for you and good for your baby. Sometimes it's just talking you off the ledge for that 15 minutes before you start really wanting to push the baby out. So at that point, because I've spent my entire pregnancy, your entire pregnancy getting to know you, when I tell you it's going to be okay, remember this is transition, we talked about this, soon you'll be pushing the baby out, you just got to hang on for 15 minutes and then you'll feel calmer because stress hormones takes that long for them to go away and for the other hormones to come and calm you. So you're hearing my voice telling you those things that I've been saying the entire pregnancy, and you believe me. You can hear me. It's not like a stranger coming in and trying to tell you, okay, now I need you to breathe deeply. It doesn't work as well when you don't know the people who are taking care of you. So one of the really, really nice things about home birth, in addition to just doing what you want, doing what your body wants to do, taking positions to help promote labor and help you feel more comfortable, is that you're not separated from your baby, ever. So there's certain things that midwives are trained to deal with, shoulders getting stuck, hemorrhage, when you bleed too much after the baby is born, and resuscitated babies. Those are the three most common complications. And those are all things that in a hospital you could have your baby whisked away from you while they're dealing with that, or while they're assessing the baby. And you don't really have a lot of control at that point. When you're in an institutional setting especially, and when you're in labor, women tend to do a thing called tend and befriend, which is they don't want to make waves, they don't want to say no to anybody, they feel vulnerable, and so they just say yes to everything because hormonally they're just trying to protect themselves and the baby by not making waves. At home, you don't really have to worry about being separated. We talked about that ahead of time. You're not going to have to say no to anybody because I'm going to make sure your baby stays with you the whole time. That's protected. Protected for you and protected for the baby. If I have a mom who's bleeding a lot, she needs to have the baby on her skin because that's her baby is telling her body, baby's out now, go ahead and make everything else happen. Let's get the placenta to come out. And so a lot of the things that I can use at home as safety measures are also the things that you put in a birth plan. So you come into a hospital setting and you say, I don't want to be separated from my baby, I don't want you to plan to cut the cord early, I don't want you to do vaginal exams during labor. When you're at home, you don't have to fight for those things. Those are usually just the way it's done. And so it's nice, we're all on the same page. It's really hard to come in and have to tell someone, oh, I want something that's not on your menu. I want this and this and this, even though that's not how you usually do it. They might tell you, oh, sure, we can do that for you, but they're not necessarily going to remember to do that, and you're going to have to remind them, and then during the labor, you're going to be in a position of having to remind them constantly of what you wanted that's different from what they usually do. So during a home birth, you're not separated from your baby's going to nurse right away as much as the baby wants to. Sometimes they need a little coaxing. Your baby's going to be in your arms, so you can catch your own baby. Your husband or partner can be present and can catch the baby too, and has a role, a real role, not just standing in the back with the nurses joking about, oh, this one's going to faint, but actually being very present and engaged and supportive. And we talked during the pregnancy about how your husband or partner or family or friends, anybody you want there, because it's your birth, how they can best support you and help you feel good while your baby's coming out. So, and we help them all to be prepared too. If there's anybody who's going to be at the birth, I try to meet with them beforehand so we can all have a talk about what it's going to look and feel like, and so that people feel comfortable. We don't want to answer questions during labor. If we're in the kitchen talking while mom is laboring, she gets annoyed. So we try to take care of all that ahead of time. So after the birth, I stay for 2-3 hours, kind of depending on how you're feeling. If I'm concerned about anything, I don't leave. So I make sure that you and your baby are stable. I need to do a newborn exam, make sure baby's breathing well, that there aren't any obvious problems, that you're doing well. I check your bottom. If you tore, I'm going to tell you how to heal it. I don't do episiotomies. I've never done one. I don't anticipate ever needing to do one because they're not really necessary. There are a lot of things that happen in a clinical setting. Who knows how they came about, but because they're routine practice, they keep happening. In a home birth, if somebody comes to me and says, I have new research, I wonder if you would read this and do this for me, I can say, sure. I don't have some protocol or some lawyers telling me you have to do this because you've always done it this way or whatever. You can just incorporate that right away. So everything is evidence-based, and I'm not going to do anything that doesn't need to be done. So I help you to heal after birth. I help you to get the baby latched on. I come back 1 day, 3 days, 1 week after the birth. So there's at least 3 visits in that first week. But if you need more, you can have more. There's no limit. You can call me anytime if you're worried about something in the middle of the night, you feel like baby's not breathing well, you have a breast infection or something going on. You just call me and I help you to deal with it. So the postpartum care is really important. I feel like that's something that gets missed in a lot of other birth settings. You come back at 6 weeks and they tell you that you're okay to have sex again. There's kind of a lot more to postpartum care than that. I do all the well baby visits after the birth. So I come back and weigh and measure the baby, make sure that nursing is going well, that you're not in pain, that your baby's gaining weight, that you have plenty of milk. Breastfeeding support is super important. So that's something else that I think kind of falls through the cracks when you don't have one person there to make sure that everything's going well. So, and that's part of the fun of it, watching your baby grow, making sure that you're feeling good. You know, if you have a tendency to baby blues or postpartum depression, there are things that we can do about that. Because I know you, I know what's normal for you, I can come back and assess you for that. The postpartum care lasts up until 6 weeks, and most of the time, any of those kind of problems are going to show up before that time. So I'm going to notice it, I'm going to say, how are you really feeling? You're going to get an opportunity to talk and get some help if you need it. So by the time 6-week postpartum visit comes around, that's usually our last visit. Baby's growing well, you're feeling great, you're getting back to your normal activity, you're healed, recovered, you have plenty of milk, and your mood is fine. That's usually when we say so long. If I have moms who have some lingering issues, we can always do, stretch those visits out. I charge a flat fee because I don't want anyone to not call me and have me come over when they need something just because they can't afford it. So, I'm just there for whatever it is that you need. And when we're both ready to say, okay, I think our postpartum visits are done, is when they're done. And typically that's about 6 weeks after. And then a lot of my clients are Facebook friends, or we keep in touch. I can see baby pictures, I can see so long, see you next time if there's going to be another one. So it's a real relationship. I think that's one of the big differences is it's a friendship, and it's one of the only settings. Somebody said it's the only place you can buy love. You definitely can. Because I really grow love with clients. And if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would do what I do for free because I really do enjoy it so much. So I think that's a big difference too. The relationship, I'm seeing you, you're a person, you're not just a client, you're not a number. I'm not having to look at your chart to remember all the things that we talked about during the last visits, those kinds of things. It ends up, I think, sending you off into motherhood with a very different feeling about the whole experience. It makes you feel like, well, there are people I can call if I need help. I was competent, I did this, look what my body is capable of doing. I think it feels very different rather than relying on experts to tell you how to do every last thing. You can rely on yourself and then know that if you need help or advice, you can get it. It's walking into, it's really an initiation. It's walking into parenthood with a very different feeling about it. So that's my goal, is to, recognize the spiritual significance of giving birth as well as just the physical event and the fact that there's a new person here, that it is a significant event in your life that deserves a lot of attention and a lot of emotional support as well as just attending to the physical details of your birth. So when you are working with a midwife, she's attending to you holistically. She's looking at your whole being, body, mind, spirit, and making sure that that's all going well for you. And that's something that's really important that I think you can't really get anyplace else. So that's kind of all I have to say about it. Obviously, I love what I do. I could go on and on and on, but I know there's a lot of other things we can talk about today too. Did you want to do questions now, or
yeah, we can
later
just
on?
do some now. I have some started questions, unless anyone else has a question that kind of popped up at all. Anything?
Yeah, I guess how would you, so say somebody is very accustomed to the traditional paradigm and they have their OB, and how do you work with that, or how do you help somebody make that change, that transfer, and having them communicate with their OB and say, hey, listen, we're gonna go this path, or have that backup plan where the OB is kind of on the same page, or, and that sort of thing. How do you address that?
Well, it's part of that can be difficult because we don't really have any formal backup arrangements. You know, when I need something, it's generally during labor, and it's something that we need right now, and we're gonna go to the closest hospital, the one that's covered by insurance, depending on what's going on. We may have time to go to one that's ideal, that has a really nice working culture and has, you know, more attention to, we get home birth transfers, so we know what people want, and we're not gonna really be nice. You know, we try to go to the ideal place, or if it's an emergency, we go to the quickest place. There's not a lot of communication necessary at that point, because any place we go, they're all gonna do pretty much the same thing if it's an emergency. You know, as far as making that transition, I think it's interesting. People will sometimes say, well, I'm really nervous talking with my doctor, I don't wanna ask for my records because I'm afraid to tell them that I'm not coming back. Those kinds of things can be more difficult, and what happens is the office will just say, okay, we'll send your records over to the midwife. And you don't ever get a call back from anybody saying, hey, where did you go? We miss you. And so I think that's one of the times that it becomes apparent that you're stepping into a different model of care. I think it's important to point out too that the traditional way would be what we are doing at home birth, and that's what women did since there have been women and since there's been birth, this is how it's been. And really the kind of care that you get in a clinic and a hospital from a group of people is new. And it's not really time tested. And so that's, you know, remembering that the traditional way is the way that where you feel supported by your community and by these people who are taking care of you. And I think that remembering that those are our roots, and it's really important. You know, it's usually not a big issue though. Most of the time people just say, oh, I have a different birth plan, I'm gonna birth in a different place, can you send my records to me or to my midwife? And they just put them in the mail, and it's no big deal. Some people do have other medical conditions that need to be co-managed with a midwife. That's something where they'll have visits for that issue, you know, say it's a thyroid problem or, you know, other things that they need care for. They will keep going to that doctor for those visits and still getting the care that they need while still coming to prenatal visits with a midwife. And, you know, we all communicate about how that's going. But usually that's through a client. You know, you're the one who's in charge of your own health. So you say, this is what my doctor had to say about my thyroid function this time. And I say, okay, let's talk about how we can improve that, or, you know, what are you going to do next about that? But really the care is in the client's hands at that point. You have to be responsible for your own, communicating between people, because you need to really understand what's going on yourself. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I'll shoot one out. How did you personally relate the pain? How can you explain it, or how do you explain it to people? And how did you relate it to yourself?
Oh, I'm not fair. I had really painful labors. I hurt a lot, and I take a long time about it. There's a lot of bitching and moaning that goes on. Yeah, it took a really long time, and it was very painful. I had 3 posterior babies out of 4 births, and so posterior is where the baby is facing the front instead of the back. It means that you have the larger diameter of the head trying to come out. If you have the baby turned towards your tailbone facing behind you, you have this little pointy part of the head coming out, and it gets nice and small, it molds, it fits better. So I had what they call back labor. It was not a lot of fun. So relating my pain to just labor pain in general, I don't even know that I can compare it to anything else, but most families that I see don't have that kind of experience. But at the same time, I could look at it and say it was really worth going through. What happens if you have back labor or a posterior baby is that your baby isn't fitting really well. And if you have your mobility, you can do things about that. You can try to make the baby come out. You can take different positions. If you go get pain management, you get an epidural and you're laying in bed, you can't really move around the way that the baby needs you to really come out. And so I would much rather have gone through the pain of labor and been able to move around and do all those different things rather than have an epidural and then say, oh, your baby's not going to come out, we need to do surgery. Because, you know, then you're putting all the pain 6 weeks out into the future rather than getting it over with during the 1 day of labor. You're getting the postpartum recovery from a C-section, which is painful and terrible and not very much fun for most people. So that was helpful for me to think about, well, it's just 1 day or a day and a half or however long it's going to be. And if I did it some other way, it would be not better, it would be much worse than that. So So I think it's just getting through it and, you know, having the love and support of people around you really helps a great deal. So, the tub was great though. If I hadn't had the tub for my last birth, I'd be 9 years pregnant right now. It was really nice. I needed it and it helped a lot. It helps a lot more than you think it's going to. You know, you think, oh, well, I get in the bath and it doesn't make my pain go away, but, you know, a labor tub is big, it's deep, you're in it up to here. That has a different effect on your hormones. Being actually immersed in the water is very different than just sitting in a bathtub that only goes up to here when you're pregnant. So yeah, that was a wonderful thing.
Any other questions? Anyone? Okay, I have a little video clip that we'll watch here. Hopefully you can see it.
Had enough time to get an epidural, and so she had an epidural, but she did not necessarily want that. And she's kind of like, why would you ever choose that? But honestly, for me, I kind of wanted to, I never broken anything, I never had any real pain experience, so I didn't really have anything to, you know, there's no way to even guess or imagine, like, what was my tolerance. And my doula really spent a lot of time asking me and trying to get a sense of what my stamina was. And, you know, I'd climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I'd done things like I could sort of say, and I think she uses marathons for people, like if you have something like that where you know it's a finite period of time, and to have a sense of what it's like to go the distance and to rest and be able to be efficient in your body. I've been a yogi for 20 years, and more than 20 years really, so really that was probably the most helpful, useful thing. And honestly, just that ability to sort of go in and not be afraid of going in, and really to confront pain. And it didn't feel like, it's like what people talk about with marathon, running towards something and it releases it, you know, it's not as, it's like the resistance of something is what makes it so painful. So I was open to playing with that idea, and really there's not been a greater yogic exercise than doing that for 12 hours. And it's not like you're aware, I was never aware of time. Even in the early parts of contractions before we called to our doula, it was never like 5 minutes, 2 hours, it was all the same. None of it, it's just kind of, you're at a different level. It's so abstract, the thing of pain and time. And I felt like you could, and I got a little bit of a sense of this from the education, the birth classes that we took, of there being those little reprieves. Like, you know, it lasts for someone, but you know there's an end, and there's like this arc to what it is. And I just found it such a challenge to be able to, like, each time have the chance to once again see if you could ride whatever that was and get to the top of it, and kind of, and each time I'd do a better job or maybe the same job, and it was just a thing that I just did within myself. And I really liked the challenge of it. It didn't, you know, pain was the last thing that I would use as a thing of like, I don't think I could do that again. Like, it wasn't that at all.
I've never experienced this kind of pain in my entire life. And I'm a highly sensitive person to begin with. A highly sensitive person that isn't